Welcome one and all to another episode of Monster Monday, the best way to start your week. We're exploring another techno terror this week, a serious cybernetic saurian sourced from the Horizon series, and a big one to boot, because this week we're looking at the Slaughterspine. While this is an official creature from the game, I still collaborated with Cameron McLeod on this, and he has provided the D&D 5e version that you can find over on the blog. This is quite possibly the biggest monster, threat-wise, in the series, but it didn't show up until the second game, which I personally never got around to playing. Design-wise, it seems to be based on the Spinosaurus, and uses a lot of plasma-based weaponry. Now, plasma is an interesting thing. Back in Starfinder 1st Edition, it was split between electricity and fire damage. It seems, based on the playtest for Starfinder 2nd Edition, they're going to have it deal fire damage with persistent electricity damage on a crit. And as a side note, Cameron went for radiant damage represented in D&D 5e. Now I'm still partial to the original design, so that is how I have chosen to represent it with this creature. Cam built his Slaughterspine at CR21, and after attempting to confirm this with the Monster Monday Discord, I settled on the same value. Then, its design used the same traits as I used for the Rake Wrist. Constrict was obvious, and then Robot and Tech just fits with the advanced design of the Slaughterspine. This is one mighty, meaty mecha monster, which we first see coming into play with its extreme strength, letting it batter about enemies. On the other hand, it does show a surprising amount of spinning and other whirling about that lends to the inclusion of a dexterity that is a single point below high as well. It continues the trend of being a physical powerhouse with a moderate bonus to its constitution, while its final positive ability score is a low wisdom, as it is the only mental stat that it makes use of any way in its design. And that comes in with its low perception, which is solely modified by dark vision as a standard ability across these chaotic constructs. There's only a pair of skills to the Slaughterspine's name, a low acrobatic skill and then a high athletic skill, which is based wholly on its strength. It doesn't actually use that athletics in its build. The Slaughterspine has a lot packed into its kit. While most of this is offense-based, there is still quite a bit to its defenses as well. Because of the other aspects that we'll explore in this block, it uses only a moderate armor class, rather than a high armor class that I classically use for the monsters that I make. It also uses a moderate pool of hit points. You know, just a pinch below 400 hit points. A very moderate value. Honestly, I could probably lower this farther due to the wealth of immunities the Slaughterspine gains as a construct, as well as the innate resistances that the Slaughterspine has with lower resistances for acid, electricity, and fire. Now admittedly, I did give it a high weakness to cold, but I worry that might not be enough. It has a pretty standard array of saving throws, featuring a high fortitude and then a moderate reflex, which might seem a bit odd given its respective dex and con values. But this just felt right to me. It does stick with a low will save, matching its low wisdom, and that leaves it open to a swath of debilitations, since it isn't immune to mental effects. That largely covers the defenses of the Slaughterspine, but before we move on, I want to talk components. This is an ability I developed and introduced for the Rake Wrist, and intend to use going forward. I'll probably even be bringing it over to the Monster Hunter creatures I build. When I designed this for the Rake Wrist, it used an extreme AC for this feature. However, with the Slaughterspine here already using a moderate AC, I decided that the AC for its components should not be extreme, and is thus a single point below it. Again, the HP of these components are based on the average damage of strikes for the Slaughterspine's level, with some of its more integral components having more HP. In-game, the chill water canisters cause the Slaughterspine to become brittle, increasing the damage it takes, which is represented here by a blanket weakness to all damage for a few rounds. The Metal Bite Sack is limited use area damage with a high DC reflex save in a fairly small area. With it already being a part of the S-Spine, it gets a worse save on its roll, which is pretty obvious design. The remaining two components are based on other actions in its kit, so we'll look a bit more at those when we get down to talking about those abilities. Obviously, before we can do that, we need to have a chat on the Slaughterspine strikes and such. This rampaging robo has a pair of boots with which to walk all over you at a high attack bonus. Now these come with an agile trait, but actually dish out moderate damage, as they don't have any reach. The Slaughterspine needs to step on a creature to attack with these, so it's not like it can do so from too far away. Its remaining attacks all have a moderate attack bonus, but are fairly unique among them. Its big damage option is Jaws. These have high damage, but on top of that, they have the Fatal D12 trait, which means any crit they dish out with these will be in the range of extreme. Meanwhile, its tail does also have high damage, but lacks the Fatal trait and is instead armed with greater reach and the Sweep trait, which is a sort of budget agile while nowhere near as good. Finally, our cybernetic Spinosaurus has the Plasma Bolts, a ranged strike to eject a blast of plasma from its maw at a decent range. Like I said, I went with a split on electricity and fire damage to represent plasma in its kit, and with this being ranged and having energy damage, it only deals low damage, on average. It's 60-10, which has an average of 33, but without a flat bonus, the low rolls are going to hurt when running this creature. But that covers the basics, so let's get into the important bits and pieces. A central feature to this creature is the Charge Up ability, a single action with the Flourish trait, limiting its usage, and for a very important reason. This action grants the Slaughterspine a unique condition known as Charged. Each stack of charge, which it can have a max of 3, grants the Slaughterspine additional damage on its strikes, imbuing them with plasma for an average increase of 5 damage on the strikes per stack of charged. This is a bit more to keep up with on the GM side of things, which I'm always cautious about adding, but I do think here that it's minor enough that it shouldn't be too hard to keep track of. Managing it though might be a tiny bit harder, because the Slaughterspine has to keep using this action each round, or else it starts losing its charges one by one. This might end up feeling like a bit of an action tax, but strikes aren't the only way that the Slaughterspine can make use of the charged state. Additionally, to represent how important this ability is to the S-Spine's design, its component has the most hit points, and destroying it doesn't even fully disable it. Instead, it changes this action to 2 actions, which makes it way harder to use, and does really cripple this creature. There's more than one way that the Slaughterspine makes use of the charged state, and we're going to see that first off with the Lancer Wave. This is a pretty standard effect, and is based off of the S-Spine unleashing 5 lasers from its tail that it drags in a 90-foot cone. Sticking with the plasma that I assume these to be, this deals a total of 16d6 damage with a high DC reflex save. Now you might note this damage is in between unlimited use and limited use area damage, but each stack of charged increases its damage by 2d6, to a max of limited use area damage. Because of this variable damage, I used a lower cooldown for this particular ability, but it's a pretty standard effect otherwise. Getting into something a bit more unique, and that the Slaughterspine needs to be charged before it can even use, is Plasma Geyser, an ability based on the way that the Slaughterspine will drive its tail into the ground and unleash pillars of plasma from it. Design-wise, this is a 2-action ability that creates small 5-foot burst areas that each deal just below unlimited use area damage, against yet another high DC reflex save. The point of order about this one is that the S-Spine can create a number of these areas equal to its charged value. This means at max it can make a total of 3 areas, but none of them can overlap, so it can't just pile on damage against a single target. And of note, this is another action that can be disabled by targeting its components, keeping it from turning the battlefield into a game of the floor is lava.
Professor, lava, hot!
The last ability that gains the most direct benefit from charged is Slaughter Sweep, which actually needs the Slaughterspine to be charged 3 before it can even use it. With this being 3 actions, the earliest that the Slaughterspine can use it is round 4. On top of that, after using this ability, the S-Spine is reduced to a charge value of 0. Given all of these factors, not only does this ability deal limited use area damage in an emanation, so all around it, it does so at an extreme DC that is, you guessed it, a reflex save. Now this is incredibly potent, and it is a horrifying surprise to spring on your players. But that's part of the fun, isn't it? An ancillary way to take advantage of the charged state is Spine Barrage, in which the S-Spine fires a series of spikes arrayed along its back. I have these functioning as plasma bolts that the Slaughterspine can fire at 6 different targets, all at the same multiple attack penalty, as a number of ability of these natures already do. Now with these being strikes, each of them benefit from the extra damage from charged, which means it is a great ability to throw out there once you have a few stacks of it under your belt. For another strike-based ability, we have Death Charge. This is a pretty standard sort of effect. It resembles Sudden Charge as well as several other powerful charge-type attacks. However, instead of just dealing straight-up damage or increasing its attack roll, this lets the Slaughterspine make use of its bifurcated lower jaw to tear apart its prey, leaving them with deep, lacerating wounds that deal persistent bleed damage. This might encourage the players to try to stay close to the Slaughterspine, but that's just where it wants them with its host of herd-hitting abilities. One final action to discuss in regards to the S-Spine is the stunning roar that it performs, which I have represented in its call to slaughter. This is another single action effect, one of the few that it has, and, perhaps more importantly, it is its only ability that targets the enemies will save at a high DC. Failing this is debilitating, as it leaves a creature not only stunned 1, but frightened 2 as well, and that gets even worse on a critical failure. On the other hand, creatures who make a save against this effect, regardless of result, are then immune to this ability for 1 minute. And what sort of madman would run an encounter that goes longer than that? Answer: me this last Sunday. That's another rampaging robo for the machine catalog. This towering techno-terror turns intrepid travelers into tatters, taking them to task as it tears and traumatizes them with tip-top talent. I landed on doing this one after both Cam and a few other folks requested it, and I'm kind of glad to have the big guy out of the way. This is the end boss for a campaign, or a great way to start it. Get your players running in a chase scene as this thing demolishes the city around them. It might be unleashed by people poking around in a crashed ship they should have left alone, or be remnants of a bygone era that has awoken to a world of sword and sorcery. Be sure to let me know what you think of this mecha monster and what other sorts of creatures you'd like to see in a comment. If you want to see the other monsters I've made, or the D&D versions of this monster, check out the Monster Monday blog, which is linked in the description below along with the Discord and Twitter. Thanks for watching, and have a monstrous Monday.